The Apache were known for their fierce and relentless warfare, their skillful and stealthy raids, and their harsh and merciless treatment of captives. They had a complex and diverse culture, a rich and varied history, and a strong and proud identity. But they also had a dark and violent side, as they often resorted to torture, mutilation, and execution to punish or intimidate their foes. The Apache were a group of related tribes that inhabited the southwestern part of North America, mainly in the present-day Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and Mexico. They spoke different dialects of the Athabascan language family and had different names for themselves, such as Chiricahua, Mescalero, Jicarilla, Lipan, or Western Apache. They were nomadic or semi-nomadic hunters and gatherers who lived in small bands or clans that were loosely affiliated with each other. They had a strong sense of kinship and loyalty, and a deep connection to their land and spirituality. The Apache had a long history of conflict with other Native American tribes such as the Navajo, the Pueblo, the Comanche, or the Ute. They also fought against the Spanish, the Mexicans, and the Americans who invaded their territory and tried to subjugate them. The Apache resisted fiercely for centuries, using guerrilla tactics and surprise attacks to harass and ambush their enemies. They were skilled warriors who used bows and arrows, spears, knives, tomahawks, clubs, and later guns and horses. They were also adept at tracking, scouting, camouflage, and survival. The Apache were not only warriors, but also torturers. They often captured their enemies alive and subjected them to various forms of punishment that were meant to inflict pain, humiliation, or death. These punishments weren't only motivated by revenge or hatred, but also by cultural or religious reasons. The Apache believed that by torturing their enemies, they could extract their power or spirit, or appease their gods or ancestors. They also believed that by enduring torture, they could prove their courage or honor, or earn a better place in the afterlife. Here are some of the horrible punishments that the Apache did in the Wild West. One of the most common and cruel punishments that Apache did was burning their captives alive, especially women who were accused of witchcraft or adultery. The Apache believed that witches were evil beings who could cause harm or misfortune to others by using magic or curses. They also believed that adultery was a serious offense that could bring bad luck or disease to the tribe. The Apache would often torture and interrogate suspected witches or adulterers until they confessed or implicated others. They would tie them to stakes or trees, or throw them into bonfires or pits of coals. They would also pour hot water, oil, or molten metal over them, or set fire to their hair or clothes. They would sometimes prolong their agony by putting out the fire and relighting it repeatedly, or by cutting off pieces of their flesh as they burnt. Burning was also a way of cleansing or purifying the tribe from evil influences or sins. Flaying. Another brutal punishment was flaying the captives alive. The Apache would use knives, sharp stones, or shells to peel off their skins from their bodies. They would sometimes start with their feet, hands, face, or genitals and work their way up or down. They would sometimes leave some patches of skin intact to increase their pain or mock them. They would sometimes wear their skin as trophies or clothing, or use it as drums or blankets. Flaying was also a way of destroying or desecrating the enemy's identity or spirit, as well as taking their power or essence. Impaling. Another gruesome punishment was impaling the captives alive. The Apache would use wooden poles, metal rods, or cactus pines to pierce through their bodies from various angles. They would sometimes insert them through their mouths, anuses, vaginas, or wounds, and push them out through their chests, backs, necks, or heads. They would sometimes leave them hanging from trees, walls, or hillsides until they died from blood loss or infection. Impaling was also a way of displaying or warning the enemy of the Apache's wrath or vengeance, as well as causing them extreme agony or terror. Scalping. Scalping was a common practice among many Native American tribes, including the Apache. It involved cutting off a piece of skin and hair from the head of a dead or wounded enemy as a trophy or a sign of victory. Scalping was also a way of humiliating and dishonoring the enemy, as well as depriving them of their spiritual power. The Apache would often scalp their enemies in front of their families or allies, or display their scalps on poles or trees. They would often sometimes scalp their own warriors who died in battle as a way of honoring them and taking their spirits with them. Captivity. Captivity was another fate that awaited many enemies of the Apache, especially women and children. The Apache would often raid settlements or villages of other tribes. They would attack at dawn or dusk using stealth and surprise to overwhelm their enemies. They would kill many of the men and take the women and children as prisoners. Captive women were often subjected to sexual abuse and violence by their captors. They would be raped, beaten, or mutilated by the warriors who captured them or claimed them as wives. Captive children were sometimes adopted by the Apache and raised as their own. They would be given new names and taught the Apache language, customs, and beliefs. They would also be trained in hunting, fighting, and raiding skills. Some captive children were killed if they were unwanted or troublesome by their captors. Captivity was also a way of assimilating or converting the enemies into the Apache culture and religion. The Apache believed that by exposing their captives to their culture and religion, they could make them respect and fear them more. Mutilation. Mutilation was another brutal punishment that the Apache did to their enemies, especially men who were captured alive or wounded in battle. The Apache would often cut off parts of their bodies such as ears, noses, lips, fingers, toes, genitals, or breasts as a way of torturing them or making them suffer. They would also sometimes force them to eat their own flesh or blood or feed it to animals. Mutilation was also a way of marking or branding the enemies as cowards or traitors, as well as reducing their physical strength or beauty. Burial alive was one of the most terrifying punishments that the Apache did to their enemies, especially women who were pregnant by rape or incest. The Apache considered rape and incest as abominations that could bring shame or a curse to the tribe. They also considered unborn children as sacred gifts from the spirits that would not be wasted or corrupted. The Apache would often bury alive pregnant women who were raped by their enemies or relatives along with their unborn children as a way of punishing them or preventing them from giving birth. They would also sometimes bury alive other enemies who were considered too dangerous or evil to be killed by normal means. Burial alive was also a way of trapping or confining the enemies in the earth where they couldn't escape or harm others. Hanging. Hanging was one of the most common punishments, especially to those who were caught stealing or spying on the Apache. The Apache valued honesty and loyalty among their tribe members and despised thieves and traitors who could endanger or betray them. They also valued secrecy and stealth among their warriors and feared enemies who could reveal or expose their plans or movements. The Apache would often hang thieves or spies by ropes or chains from trees or poles as a way of killing them or making them suffer. They would also sometimes hang other enemies who were considered too weak or unworthy to be killed by other means. Hanging was also a way of displaying or warning the enemies of the Apache's power or vengeance. Drowning was one of the most unusual punishments, especially to those who were accused of breaking oaths or promises. The Apache valued trust and honor among their tribe members and allies and hated liars and oath breakers who could deceive or disappoint them. They also valued water as a precious and sacred resource that could give life or healing to them. The Apache would often drown oathbreakers by tying rocks or weights to their feet and throwing them into rivers or lakes as a way of punishing them or making them pay for their lies. They would also sometimes drown other enemies who were considered too dirty or polluted to be killed by other means. Drowning was also a way of cleansing or washing away the enemy's sins or impurities. Cannibalism. Cannibalism was done to those who were killed in battle or ritual sacrifices. The Apache believed that eating the flesh or blood of their enemies could give them their strength or spirit, as well as appease the spirits of their ancestors or gods. They also believed that eating their own dead warriors could honor them and take their spirits with them. The Apache would often eat parts of their enemies' bodies, such as hearts, livers, brains, or bones, as a way of consuming them or making them part of them. They would also sometimes eat parts of their own dead warriors as a way of mourning them or remembering them. Cannibalism was also a way of surviving or adapting to harsh conditions or scarce resources. These were some of the horrible punishments that the Apache did in the Wild West. They show us the harsh and violent reality of life on the frontier, as well as the complex and diverse culture and beliefs of the Apache tribe. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget to leave a comment down below and let us know what you thought about this topic. See you next time, and bye for now.